Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. My name's Bobby, and this is how I grow orchids and carnivorous plants. Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. Today's video is going to be another Care Collab video. Michael from Honeybees and Orchids and I spoke a while ago about doing a video on Dendrobium loddigesii, and it evolved to so much more. We've got several other people who've decided to join in today with us. We've got Fernanda Nascimento, we've got NC Shap, we've got none other than Roger from Roger's Orchids, and Todd from Todd's Tropicals also joining us today on this Care Collab video. Very, very exciting. We've got several people from all over the world, different climates, and we're all going to talk about how we grow this plant and try to give you some care and cultural information on it so that you can best decide how to grow it in your environment. That's one of the real beautiful things about this Care Collab series that Nina from Ninja Orchids started, so I'm going to give her a shout out again here as well because this is all her little brainchild and her baby, and what a great baby it is. So following on in those footsteps, we are doing this video today on the beautiful Dendrobium loddigesii. As you can see, I am fortunate enough to have mine in bloom at the moment, and it is absolutely spectacular. It's filling my grow tent up with this lovely fragrance and just beautiful, beautiful blooms. I have two, but we'll get a little closer examination of this plant here in a moment. I'd like to start by sharing a little bit of information about where it's from and how it grows in the wild, so let's get to it. Dendrobium loddigesii is a miniature to small-sized, warm to cool-growing epiphytic, lithophytic, or terrestrial orchid that comes from Laos, Vietnam, and China. It grows from 1,000 to 1,500 meters with a tufted, pendant, subterrate, striated, several-noded, white-sheathed stem carrying alternate fleshy, oblong, acute leaves, and has a dry winter and a wet spring and summer. The long-lasting, fragrant, sweetly floral scented flowers are found from February through June on short 3-inch single-flowered inflorescences that arise from the nodes of a leafless cane. Dendrobium loddigesii is the type of plant you would consider to be a resting type dendrobium. It does like to dry out pretty well and cool down quite a bit from its summer and spring temperatures into the late fall and the winter time. Myself, I like to take this plant down to about 58 degrees, 57 degrees in the wintertime, and I only water it with a very, very light misting, maybe once every 10 days to 2 weeks, depending on the temperatures. If I get a couple warmer days, I may give it a little bit of help, but really, I look for the pseudobulbs to shrivel a bit. If that happens, I immediately start to water it, and otherwise, I just kind of let it do its thing. I keep a really high humidity in here, and I also believe that helps. Where these plants are from, they're pretty much in a tropical area, not quite steamy jungle all the time. Again, it's from mixed deciduous and some evergreen forest areas, but this plant does have high humidity year-round. It really likes 80% or so for most of the year. In the fall, you can drop it down to 70 or so, but in my grow environment, it literally gets 80, 85 all year long. It doesn't have a choice. I have other plants in here that want high humidity, that need it all year long, and I like to be able to give it to them. So what that does, as far as my winter rest goes, is it means I water even less frequently than a lot of other people. A little bit of water in the wintertime with the cooler night temps goes a really long way. And since I'm growing indoors in a grow tent setup, I do have some sunshine through the window behind you, but I don't have the heat and the radiation from the sun all day that helps dry my mounts out. So all my winter resting types, not just this one, I'm very careful about how much water I give them, and other plants as well who like a wet-dry cycle or things like that, but that's part of a different video. Moving on, this Dendrobium loddigesii is a little bit special. I got this plant from Andy's Orchids on December 4th of 2019, so I've had this plant a little over a year. The first time it bloomed for me, I really couldn't take credit for the blooms. I'd only had it for a few months. It was my first true resting type dendrobium, and I really couldn't take credit and wouldn't take credit for these lovely blooms. However, the blooms that you see here, and I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see them, these are all me. So I've had this plant through an entire growing season. It grew several new growths last year and has rewarded me with lovely, amazing blooms. As you can see, the bloom, it's a pinkish purple color. It's got just a hint of venation if you see it backlit. It's got this orangish yellow throat with a white lip around it and the pinkish color around that. It's fimbriated, so it looks a bit hairy. It is just a lovely bloom, absolutely amazing. It does have an amazing floral scent. It's kind of a sweet scent, but it does smell like a flower to me. It's very floral. Anyhow, beyond these blooms being extraordinarily special, the plant itself is actually rather special. As I said, I got this from Andes, and not only is this the loddigesii, but this is the variegated version. Zoom back in. If you can see that, the leaves are variegated just slightly around the margins, and to me, that makes this an extremely special, and it is kind of a rare thing to find. Very beautiful, and again, not only are the blooms worth it, but it also makes the plant that much more enjoyable to grow because the plant itself is beautiful. I do have a second bloom up here on a smaller growth, and this one from the largest growth that it produced last season. Last season, this growth here started to produce keikis at the end, which is kind of what this plant does. It almost has what you would consider to be a creeping habit. It'll produce keikis, they will take root, they will latch on to whatever is next to them, whatever substrate, because they are lithophytic, terrestrial, or epiphytic. It'll just latch on and go. If this breaks off and falls down on rocks, it'll latch on and go. And if it breaks off, falls down, and lands on the ground, it will also latch on and grow. Very prolific. That very fact in and of itself is one of the reasons why this is considered to be an extremely hardy and relatively easy to grow dendrobium. It's said that in culture, when given the right conditions and enough space, they can form specimen plants in no time. I'll throw a picture up of one, and just think, guys, how nice would it be to have one of these that looked like this. Alrighty, so more cultural information about this plant. When it comes to watering, again, just like any other dendrobiums, if you watch Roger's channel, you'll know the motto: feed and water well when they're in growth, and back off when they're not. The scriptures say that it should be constantly moist during the growing season, from spring to autumn, but again, watch your plant. If your plant's not growing, it doesn't have to be constantly moist. You will cause root issues, you will cause rot issues, and you may ultimately lose the plant if you're not careful. So again, when it's growing, water it. When it's not growing, don't water it. Don't water it in the rest unless you absolutely see that you have to. And when you do, it's just a tiny bit of water. It's not a soaking. Very, very important with these. Fertilizing. I feed these MSU fertilizer from about 120 to about 180, depending on the season, and again, depending on how much they're growing. When they're first starting to get back into growth, I will not feed them MSU yet. I might give them calcium nitrate, I'll give them some kelp, some calcium with magnesium, things like that to kind of get them back in the slow swing until they're getting soaked daily again, and then I'll ease in the feed. I might even start at a lower level, like a Masdevallia level around 90 or so, and work my way up to the 120 mark, and then again work my way up higher to 150, 160, 180, based on the rate of growth, the temperatures, the day length, etc. Having that said, that's all there really is to it, and like I mentioned, I give not only MSU fertilizer, I'll give them calcium nitrate every so often, I give calcium and magnesium, CalMag every so often, and Kelp Max every so often, just like I do with all the rest of my plants. Temperature wise, these can take up to, mid 80s or so. They grow cool to warm, so they do prefer, I believe, more intermediate temperatures. That is kind of more what they're used to, so I would say 80 to mid 80s as a high, absolute high, and then at nighttime, if you can get it down in the mid 60s to around 60 degrees, it'll be a very, very happy plant. Again, in the wintertime, you're going to want to definitely take this thing down to 60s or the high 50s because it does need a rest. Some people take this plant lower, being that it is a cool growing orchid. It can go down to the mid 50s or even below, and it will be okay. Again, that is up to you, up to your environment, but I would recommend for good bloomings to get this thing down to at least 60 degrees or 58 degrees or so at night if you want to have great success. It also helps the plant rest and build energy so it can push stronger, healthier, and better new growths, which is a very, very important part of its culture and the way it grows. I will take this opportunity now to take this camera off the stand. We'll take a nice close look at this plant, have a little bit more of a chat about it, and I'll wrap this thing up with some pictures and some music. So this is the plant itself. Here's that second bloom up here. It's kind of facing down, but still very, very beautiful. Again, lovely blooms on this plant. You just have to see it in person. The camera just does not do it justice. This was a short cane. I really wasn't expecting this thing to bloom. Comes from the main base of this plant, which has two other canes that come down here. This plant, when I got it, was already attached by the fishing line, and last year it decided to push out this growth, which is the best growth on the plant, which has our other bloom. As you'll notice, the part that bloomed is leafless. This had another node that pushed what started to be a bud, but it did blast, unfortunately. But it has not lost all of its leaves yet. The growth back here was actually on when I got the plant, and that's okay, but it pushed out this growth last year, which tried to bloom, but the bud blasted again. And it also pushed out this little wimpy growth, which did nothing. So far this year, it's got two growths coming from the base of this keiki. It's pushed out some decent roots. So what's going to happen to this plant once it's done blooming? It's coming off of this god-awful cedar tile. It's going to go on a really nice piece of cork, and this is going to be touching the cork. So we're going to have another base just like this and this that this plant is going to start to jet out from, get energy from the mount, stay more moist. Hopefully these grow to be a much better size, more like this one or the parents here, and we will finally be in business with this plant. No signs of new growth from either of these two bases yet, but I imagine once this plant's done blooming and the day length gets a little bit better, we will see growths from both of those areas as well. Anyhow, that's my video on Dendrobium loddigesii, and we will go out the same way we came in, looking at this lovely bloom, and I will roll some pictures so you can get a little bit better detail, because again, the video just does not do it. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy my Care Collab video on Dendrobium loddigesii, and I hope you guys join in and watch everybody else's videos who worked so hard on these. So again, we have Michael from Honeybees and Orchids, we have Fernanda Nascimento, Orchids and Succulents, we have Incy Shep, Roger from Roger's Orchids, and Todd's Tropicals. Thank you all for participating in this as well. I look forward to seeing all of your videos as well. And as always, until next time, please stay safe and happy growing.